Hey guys, it's Crystal and welcome back to my channel. So today I'm going to be telling you about all the books I have DNF'd and why I DNF'd them. I'm kind of scared for this. There's definitely some books on this list that are very popular, but anyway. Also, if you don't know, DNF means did not finish, so these are just all the books that I never ended up finishing. I'm gonna start off with the physical books that I have because most of my physical TBR are books that I DNF'd, which is, I don't know how I feel about that, but anyway, I've got all of my physical books in front of me, so we're gonna go through all of them first and then we're gonna do the other books that I have DNF'd. So yeah, let's get into this. Okay, book number 1, Sorcery of Thorns. This is one that I'm scared for because it's definitely like a favorite of Book Talk. It's definitely a well-loved book. Personally, when I was reading this, Elizabeth really annoyed me. I honestly don't even remember why. I think she was just making some silly decisions and she just frustrated me. So yeah, and I definitely got bored reading this book. I feel like at the time I didn't think a lot was happening, which is potentially what this book is intended to be. But yeah, I just didn't vibe with it the first time that I read it. I literally got I've taken out the bookmark because I needed another bookmark, but I got really close to the end. I want to say there was I'd say I was probably 80% through or something, and I was just you know what? I just don't want to read it anymore, so I put it down. I was extra salty because I bought it because of the cover, because stunning. Charlie Burwater is an incredible artist. Basically, I just didn't mesh with this book. If you look on Goodreads, I did give this 2 stars. However, I feel like that was a little harsh. I think it was just my personal taste. This book wasn't grabbing me at the time, but I don't think this is a bad book, and I think definitely depending on your taste, depending on specific tropes that you like, you would love this book. I just read it at a time where it didn't hit for me. I love Silas though. He's a cutie. So yeah, that is Sorcery of Thorns. Book 2 is Dark Rise by C.S. Pacat. I don't know how to say their last name. I know they have another series that is really popular, which is why, because I was a little bit younger, the other series is an adult series and this is young adult, I believe. I think it's why I picked up this one as opposed to the other book, because I was not of the age to be reading adult books at the time. You're gonna sense a theme throughout this video of why I DNF'd books, but I was this far in, okay? I was page 95. I was nearly 100 pages in. Barely anything had happened, and being younger and, you know, used to reading Rick Riordan books where things are happening all the time and the chapters are really short and Percy's in a monologue and the dialogue of the characters is really snappy, I got really bored. Because by 100 pages in, I just didn't care. I didn't care about the characters yet, nothing had happened to make me care about them, and nothing had happened in general for me to be interested in the plot. So I DNF'd this. This is years ago. It just had a really slow start, which was definitely a detriment for me reading this book. However, since then I have decided that I would be willing to try this book again now that I'm a little bit more used to adult books and adult fantasy, or just books in general that take a longer time to settle into the story and get things going. So when I am in the mood for it, when I'm ready to pick this up again, I will give it another go. But at the time, yeah, it was just a little bit boring for me, just too much of a slow start. Book 3, The Atlas Paradox. Okay, I read The Atlas 6 when it was blowing up on everywhere. My feelings toward The Atlas 6 were that I loved the characters and the character relationships and the way that Olivia Blake wrote the dynamics between them all. But as many people have said, I just was so bored by the plot, nothing was happening. Again, as I said, you will sense a theme throughout this video. I really loved the characters, but I just could not get into the plot at all. I did not reread the Atlas 6 before I started this, so to begin with, I was sort of lost on what was happening. But again, it just came down to the plot. It just doesn't grab me, and yeah, I don't know. I love the characters, but I don't know if I'll ever revisit the Atlas 6 in order to like come back to the second book to be able to properly read it. I don't know. I have mixed feelings about this series, so I don't even know where did I get up to. 90 pages in. Unfortunately, this just didn't grab me again, and I was also in a reading slump at the time. So that was the Atlas Paradox. Okay, number 4 is Arch Enemies by Marissa Meyer. I love the Lunar Chronicles. Love that series so much. So then of course I wanted to read Marissa Meyer's other work. I read Renegades and I absolutely loved it. It's, if you don't know, I haven't been explaining these plots at all, but anyway. The Renegades trilogy is about superheroes. It's kind of a mix of sci-fi, fantasy, dystopian. Again, she likes blending her genres, but I guess this would lead more dystopian sci-fi as opposed to fantasy. But in this world, people have superpowers, and I loved the first book. I felt like Marissa created some like really fun and unique superpowers other than just like super strength and invisibility and flying that most like superhero movies or whatever have. There were some really fun and interesting powers which I really loved about the first book. And then I picked up Arch Enemies and I honestly don't even remember what made me DNF this book. How far did I get into it? 134 pages. I think again I was in a reading slump and I just sort of, the hook that Renegades, which is the first book, had on me, I think it, because of my reading slump, I think just sort of went poof. And so when I tried reading Arch Enemies, I just sort of like lost the inclination to read it. But this is absolutely a series that I want to come back to because I know I'm going to love it. So I do plan on rereading the first book and then getting to this one and then finally reading the third book. But that is Arch Enemies by Marissa Meyer. Okay, number 5, we have The Final Gambit by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. Again, this is another series that I started off and I absolutely adored it. I loved the first and second book. I ate it up so quickly. And then I think I had to wait like a year for the third book, or at least like a few months or something. So by the time the third book came out, one, I'd forgotten what happened, so I started reading it and I like didn't even know what was happening because there's absolutely no recap to help you understand the plot in these books, and like things are wild, okay? So I was just lost first and foremost. I think I either waited a while before I bought the book after it came out, or I bought it and then I didn't read it for a while. But by the time I started reading, I knew what had happened. Or maybe I started reading it, put it down, and then I found out. Either way, I found out how it ended between a certain love triangle, and if you don't want spoilers then skip ahead to the next book. You gone? Okay. My poor Grayson, okay? He was done so dirty, okay? I know I didn't read it and I know there's reasons, but I never liked Jameson. How do you say his name? Jameson? Jameson. I never liked him from the start, and I never liked him with Avery because to me, he always felt like he just liked Avery because of the game, which I think people have said about Grayson. So to me, it always felt like his feelings for Avery were never real. It was just because he was obsessed with the game and Avery was part of the game. So that always felt like why he liked her to me. Like to me, it always felt a little bit icky that they were together. I just felt like he had some issues and he like used her as a coping mechanism. Then there's the whole thing with Emily, I think it is. But the girl that died and like they fought over and whatever, which again, ew. Can we stop doing the whole brothers fighting over the same girl thing? Because like that's just weird in and of itself. But then on top of it, they previously already fought over a girl who then died. Like, anyway. And I think they kept saying that like Avery reminded them of her. Weird. Whose alarm keeps going off? Oh my god. Anyway, so I just had a whole problem with that relationship, which I know I think some things get explained, but Grayson just always felt like more of a genuine person to me. Jameson felt a little off the rails. By the time I knew what happened, like how it turned out, I just didn't really care because, yeah. And then to be able to actually understand what was happening, I had to go reread the other books and I just didn't want to do that. So yeah, I just ended up DNFing this book. Page 78, I DNF'd. That is The Final Gambit. Okay, so I thought I started Defend the Dawn, which is the sequel to Defy the Night, but I don't think I ever started it because my bookmark is literally on the very first page. So we're not counting this, but I also don't think I'm going to read it. Okay, the actual number 6, Calls Down the Hawk by Maggie Stiefvater. I'm so sorry, okay? If you don't know, the Dreamer trilogy is the continuation or like spin-off series of the Raven Cycle, which is my favorite series. It specifically follows 2 of the characters from the original core cast of characters from the Raven Cycle. The reading slump strikes again. I bought this because at the time I worked in a bookshop and my boss was going to like get rid of this book because no one had bought it, and I was like, hang on, I will read that. I got 142 pages into it and I stopped reading specifically because I didn't want to push through reading it while I was in the reading slump, because I didn't want to like have that affect my experience with the book, because I love Maggie's writing and I love the Raven Cycle and the world and everything, so I didn't want to like not like this book. So I plan on reading this another time when I'm like again in the mood for it. Also, my favorite characters from the Raven Cycle are Blue and Gansey, and this book follows mainly Ronan and Adam. And sometimes I found that Ronan's chapters, at least in the beginning of this book and some of the books in the Raven Cycle, some of Ronan's chapters are just very repetitive for me. I love him, okay? Don't hurt me. At the time, it just wasn't something that was also like assisting my reading experience on top of my reading slump, you know? I plan on coming back to this, I swear. Okay, number 7 out of the physical books that I have DNF'd, The Sun and the Star. Oh, I saved the worst ones for last, didn't I? I know Nico is a fandom fave, so don't attack me before I explain. I was in a reading slump again, okay? I've had a very on and off persistent reading slump for the past like 2 years. It's been very annoying. I bought this, I think partially I couldn't remember the things that had happened in Trials of Apollo, which I think this takes place after Trials of Apollo. I could be wrong. I also just wasn't in the mood for Rick's style of writing. As much as I love him, I just couldn't get into it at the time because of my reading slump. Also, the size of this thing intimidated me at the time because I was in a reading slump and I was like, it's gonna take me like 6 months to get through this thing. It's how many pages? Let's try not to get spoiled while we do this. 462 pages. How many pages did I get in? 162. Wow. I got further into it than I thought I did. Anyway, I will be coming back to this. I'll probably do a full reread of the entire Rivaldenverse books because I also haven't read the Game Chronicles, which I need to read, I know. But yeah, The Sun and the Star. Okay, now we're on to all the books that I don't have physical copies of. And number 1 is Powerless by Lauren Roberts. I briefly discussed this in my ranking video, ranking all the young adult fantasy books that I've read. I got to page 236. There was another 300 pages after that, oh my god. Okay, my main problems. The plot, I said this in my other video, but it just mashed a bunch of different popular series together with no like flavor of her own, you know, like it was just very clearly like, I'll take this element from this book and that element from that book and that element from that book and squish them together, as opposed to like being inspired from those books and taking like little parts of those books but developing on them further out of her own imagination. My main problem being the Hunger Games. She has essentially a copy and paste of Hunger Games, especially like the training leading up to it and like the interviews and everything, except the Hunger Games, the whole concept of it, the whole idea of the Hunger Games is a reflection of our world. It's purely a social commentary. It's not anything that's like fun fantasy, like everything can be related back to real life. But in Powerless, it's just like a plot device and there's no commentary on like the brutality of the games like that. So that was a whole thing of its own. And then the Enemies to Lovers. If you haven't seen this book on BookTok, Bookstagram, BookTube, I don't know how you haven't, but it is mainly as an Enemies to Lovers book. I have a detailed review on my Goodreads if you really want to see what I thought about it. But this just was not enemies to lovers, okay? They were acting like friends within like 100 pages after meeting one another. Like you could tell she was trying to make it flirty and trying to hit those tropes without taking the time to like piece it together slowly. Like, they're concerned for each other's lives. Like, I DNF'd at 236 pages, okay? And they were both concerned for each other's well-being by that page, well before that even. That's fine to do. Just don't promote it as an enemies to lovers. I don't want to be too mean because it is her first book, but I think the fact that it was so hyped up and people talk about it so much was just a big downfall for me, because I don't even think I went in with super high expectations, but it just baffled me even further that people were like raving about it so much. But yeah, I gave this 2 stars and I stick by that. I'm sorry, that's powerless. Next book, The Heart of Betrayal by Mary E. Pearson. I'm not gonna get too far into this. If you do want to see my in-depth thoughts about this book, then you can go watch I think it's my January and February reading wrap-up, or check out my Goodreads or Storygraph. I have my review up there. I don't think I've ever been more annoyed at a book, except for maybe Powerless. I cannot express the amount of frustration that this book took out of me. Yeah, the plot was just boring, nothing happened, could not stand Caden, and there was just a bunch of stupid things happening between Caden and the main character. I'm not gonna get into it. If you wanna go see how I feel about that book, I'll link the other video. You can go watch it. I'm not getting into it again. For my mental health, I gave that book 1 star. Moving on. Next up is The Book That Wouldn't Burn. This was another occasion of me just being like in a reading slump, and a book had a slow start, which just didn't encourage my ability to read it. I believe this is an adult fantasy, but it definitely had a slower start, which my attention span at the time just like couldn't handle that. However, I'm very intrigued by this book, so I will be returning to it. I don't remember how many pages I got into it. I think it was like a decent amount. But yeah, I'm definitely going to be coming back to this book when I'm more prepared for like a less action-packed sort of book. I remember what happens in the beginning, but I don't know where the book leads, so I'm curious. The world was interesting, the characters was interesting, the actual library, the characters that are in the library, weird, interesting, unique. Strange. I'm intrigued. So I definitely want to revisit this book. Just at the time, I just did not have the attention span for it whatsoever. The Book That Wouldn't Burn, Daughter of the Moon Goddess. See, I thought this was a reading slump thing, but I don't even remember why I DNF'd this. I read very little of it. Like, I probably read the first like 3 chapters. That's a stretch. If you read the book, it's when she's like right after she's escaped the moon, the palace, whatever. It's like very, very early on in the book that I stopped reading, but I'm absolutely again coming back to this book. I think it was just another case of the reading slump and me not wanting to push through when it could potentially make me dislike the book, because I knew that I would like it if I was in the right headspace for it. But yeah, Daughter of the Moon Goddess, I DNF'd very early on, but I will absolutely be coming back to that. The Hurricane Wars, again. I think at the time I had another book to read or something. I don't know. I can't remember. I had this on loan from the library, and I think I had another book to read, and I had like 3 days to read this book or something. The Hurricane Wars, I mean. And I was not going to be able to finish that in time. Okay, I said it's a little too high fantasy for my brain at the time. Anyway, I think it was my reading slump. I don't know. But what I did read of it was very good. Immediately felt a connection to the characters. Stunning 10 out of 10 writing. And I'm very interested in the plot and the characters and the world and everything. So absolutely coming back to this another time. Rurouni Rising by Leigh Bardugo. If you don't know, this is book 3. The 3rd and final book in the Shadow and Bone trilogy, or the Grisha trilogy, is that what it's called? My literal only note here is that I was sick of Mal and Alina and the Darkling, and that I got bored. I was someone who read Six of Crows before I read Shadow and Bone, and I adored Six of Crows. Shadow and Bone, loved the first book, okay? Second book, it was okay. I loved Nikolai. I loved that he was in the second book. Third book, sick of Mal, sick of Alina. Alina's making dumb decisions. Sick of the Darkling and his manipulative whatever he was doing. And then we're in the cave, and I just like, There were a lot of annoying people around in the cave. I don't know, there were a lot of weird people. People were just acting weird and I just was not vibing with it. The only reason that I wanted to finish it was because I want to read The King of Scars, and that spoils the end of Ruin and Rising, but I know what happens, so I'm like, it doesn't matter anyway. But yeah, I'm gonna read King of Scars at some point, but I don't think I'm gonna be returning to Shadow and Bone because it's like, it's not a bad series. Like, the first book I would say is a good first book to a fantasy series, but it just doesn't compare to Six of Crows. But like, I'm glad I read Six of Crows first, because otherwise, can you imagine if I read Shadow and Bone and was like, I don't like this, I'm not gonna read Six of Crows. Yeah, Ruin and Rising, I just I could not care less. The Night Circus, who wrote this? The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. This was so boring. I was, again, like 100 pages in and nothing had happened, which, before you say it, that's the whole point of this book. It's one of those books that is like, no plot, just vibes. The essence of this book is the atmosphere and the writing and just like the vibes of it all. But it just didn't do it for me. I could maybe, if I was in a mood for that, I could maybe get into it, but I don't think I'm going to be picking it up. I just don't think it's a book that I'm going to be interested in reading. Unfortunately, I think I like having some plot in my books. We're almost there. 2 books left. The next book, We'll Always Have Summer by Jenny Han. My first line in my notes is just like keyboard smash. This book made me rage and I'm trying to talk about it without getting mad. I hate everyone. I hate Jeremiah. I hate Belly. I hate Conrad. By the way, spoilers for this book if you haven't read it. If you've just watched the series, I would recommend skipping ahead. Okay, the whole cheating proposal thing is the dumbest thing to ever happen in any book. Well, that's a stretch, but you know, it really ticked me off, okay? It was just such a plot convenience for Jenny to write, to make Jeremiah the like wrong option for Belly, to like force her to go back to Conrad. I honestly don't care either guy. Well, no, I do care. After this whole thing, I do care who she ends up with, because it absolutely should not be Jeremiah. If she wanted Belly to end up with Conrad, which obviously she did, there were other ways to have Jer and Belly break up that would make sense, that would not be so incredibly stupid and then make such a awful mess for the whole family. That's like, gives such oh my god, the secondhand embarrassment from this series is incredible. I literally got a very little way into the book and I was like, oh no, I absolutely can't do this. First of all, I literally don't care what you Conrad defenders say. Jeremiah would not have cheated on Belly. Like, that just was not in his personality prior to this book. I know people are like, but he did it. Moving past. It's just not something that he would have done. It's not something that makes sense for his character. If he, as he said, was like in love with Belly for this whole time, he was by far the nicer brother. I do think that he mostly liked Belly because Conrad liked her and Belly liked Conrad. It had a lot to do with jealousy, but still, he was a nice guy. He was not someone that would cheat. Belly would cheat. Conrad and Jer, I don't think they would. I just don't think that's in their nature, especially because of their dad. Anyway, I hate Belly, I hate Jeremiah, I hate Conrad, and honestly, I kind of still hate them in the show. I am purely there for Steven and Taylor's relationship. I don't care about anyone else. Taylor, honestly my favorite character. I did not care to finish this book, and I couldn't bring myself to put myself through that experience. I'm actually really terrified for season 3 because if I have to watch that all happen, I hope that she does end up with Conrad in season 3 because I think they've changed his character, or at least Chris brings a sort of warmth to Conrad's character where like he's a nicer person and you can definitely see why he reacts the way he does. And I don't think he's ever been like super awful in the TV series. But Jer, on the other hand, you can see like the sparks of jealousy and that being the motivation behind why he does the things that he does. So I feel like they are creating his character in the TV series to make more sense to lead up to the whole cheating thing. But I don't know. I still feel like they may change whether or not that happens, but we'll see. Okay, final book after that whole rant about the Summer I Turned Pretty. Final book is Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. This is another book that I absolutely want to continue. I really love the writing and the characters and like the backstory that we were getting. I was immediately sucked into this book and the characters. I just simply again was hit by my reading slump. I just didn't have the motivation to read it, and I again didn't want my reading slump to affect my feelings toward this book because I know that I will love it when I do read it. But yeah, I just didn't want to jeopardize my experience with this book because of my reading slump, so I did DNF it, but again, I will pick it up sometime in the future. Oh my god, okay, those are all the books that I have DNF'd. There are definitely some books that I have started like the first chapter or something of and just never gotten back to, which aren't in this list because I cannot remember all of them or I cannot find all of them, but these are the ones that I remember and that like left an impression, good or bad. Let me know if you DNF books very often or if you like to push through, or if you also DNF'd any of the books that I did on this list. But yeah, I really hope you enjoyed this video. You can check out my links in the description for my art Instagram, my Goodreads story graph, and also my Ko-fi if you would like to support me. I will see you all again soon. Bye!